Okay, one of the primary reasons I'm here talking about American culture is because unless you understand the culture of Americans, and by culture I mean our basic values, our beliefs, our ways of thinking, it's almost impossible to explain our behavior, our personal behavior, our economic, political, social behavior, and it's almost impossible to explain our public policy, either domestic or internationally. For example, if you had to explain the healthcare debate going on in the United States today, you really couldn't explain it unless you talked about traditional values, the values Americans place on individualism, and the belief that government shouldn't interfere in people's lives, a certain suspicion of an overly powerful central government. I mean, the first immigrants to come to the United States didn't want a king, a queen, or a pope. And therefore, unless you explain the values, it's almost impossible to, understand the behavior and to communicate it clearly to people from other cultures. When I start talking about the melting pot society in the U.S., of course here in India, people immediately compare India with the United States. And of course, historically, there are commonalities. For example, we both kicked out the British and so forth. But when we talk about the melting pot, the problem with that metaphor is it doesn't reflect the reality that certain people didn't melt into the pot. And here I'm talking about people of color. And rather than being a melting pot, I argue historically it was more of a cookie cutter, with a white male Protestant Anglo-Saxon mold or shape. And if you could fit that mold, then you could easily move into the dominant society. So if you came from Europe, you change your name from Strapinski to Stevens, you become a Protestant, you refuse to let your children speak Polish, and you're an American. But if you came from Africa, if you came from Mexico, or if you're an American Indian, you couldn't change your skin color, your hair texture. You were identifiably different and therefore could be excluded. So to say that everyone had an equal opportunity to melt into the pot historically is not true. And today, most of us Americans would say we become a salad bowl or a mosaic or a tapestry. And those metaphors reflect the assumption that you can keep your differences. You're still an American. You're an African American, an Indian American, a Muslim American. And there's almost no country on the face of the earth where you can be a hyphenated anything. So we have a president who's president of all Americans, but says, I'm an African American. And we say, okay, no problem with that. And of course, what we're seeing in the United States also is dramatic demographic changes. The Census Bureau just a few months ago reported that before 2042, white people are going to be a minority in the United States. And for most of us, we say, okay, that's not a big deal. And so we are becoming, for the first time in our history, the multicultural, pluralistic society that we claim we were, but we really weren't. But we're becoming that kind of society. And I argue when I talk to audiences here in India that multiculturalism is not a problem. It's not an obstacle. It's an enormous opportunity. It's a strength. It allows for enormous creativity. And I think in India the same thing is true, that India is very creative. It produces many patents, whereas homogeneous cultures like Japan or China are not all that creative. They're very good at productivity, but not in terms of innovation and creation. And so multiculturalism is a strength. The differences between India and the U.S. are also very apparent. Here in India, the cultures that exist go back for thousands of years. And there are many who would say we were here first. In the United States, only the American Indian could say they were here first. So there are also differences between India and the U.S., but most of the audiences I've spoken to keep comparing the United States with India. Okay, thank you.